there any relevance of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric? From feedback to learner autonomy, we'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the TEFLology podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL Pioneers.
Okay, so today's TEFL Pioneer is Tim Johns.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually a recommendation sent in to us by John and Muriel Higgins. And actually both Tim and John co-authored the book Computers in Language Learning in 1984 together.
Wow.
And I think that probably predates
This
term.
podcast.
Certainly predates this podcast, and us, well, me, definitely.
Yeah, me as well.
Not me.
But I think
Fossil.
I think it predates call, or the terminology that we know as call.
Right.
So it was probably quite a pivotal book in its time. But John sent us an email saying he suggested we talk about the life and work of Tim Johns. So that's what we're going to do today, basically. Do you know anything about Tim Johns?
I didn't until we got that email, and then I was recently reading the book Becoming and Being an Applied Linguist, edited by Rod Ellis, and a lot of the people in that made mention of Tim Johns actually.
Okay.
So I've learned a bit about him in the past few weeks.
Great. Okay. John also sent us John Higgins. That is not. Yeah, this is going to be confusing today because it's Tim Johns, but I'm also going to be talking about John Higgins too. But John Higgins sent us a clip of him giving a speech about Tim Johns, and it was actually a speech during his Tim Johns' memorial event.
I see.
In 2009. He passed away in 2009, so there was some kind of event held in his name. And John Higgins was kind enough to send us a video of him giving a short talk, and I may use some clips of that in this podcast. So look out for that if I actually do get around to doing that or not.
In this section of the podcast, not just sprinkled randomly through.
No, in
they
this
could be
section of the
listening to it
podcast.
right now.
So you may hear something later, listeners. So Tim Johns, he's perhaps best known for developing data-driven learning, DDL for short. Do you have any idea what that could be?
Is it like corpora based? Is it something to do with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
It's heavily influenced by corpora, and it came out of the University of Birmingham, which is always talked about whenever you mention corpora.
Yep.
I think that's where a lot of the certainly the British side of that came from. I think the co-build.
Co-build. Yep.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys working
right.
in the 1980s. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about DDL. One of the driving theories behind DDL is that students act as language detectives.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest way to kind of think about this. So basically the students discover the facts about language themselves from authentic self-access materials.
Okay.
And the authentic materials in this case is the corpus that they're presented.
Right.
Or the corpora.
So it's more descriptive than prescriptive, you could say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use that later in my section. So
Okay. The argument behind this approach was that the students were motivated to remember what they have worked hard to find out.
Okay.
So it's not actually about learning. It's about it's discovery. It's a way of discovery.
Yeah.
It's the discovery learning.
But motivated in what sense?
And he introduced another one, rather novel idea in those days, that you got students to wager, possibly virtual counters, not real money, but to wager on their expectation of an answer being right. How confident were they? A lovely idea. And I think it was picked up also by Chris Jones, who also produced this nice notion that a student hasn't necessarily lost interest in a quiz question when they've got the right answer. They may still be interested to know why the other answers were wrong. And I put this back to Tim later, the slogan, the computer puts the trial back into trial and error. And we worked on that one together.
So the trial of going through and trying to work out these rules, these patterns of grammar and vocabulary, the simple act of doing that is in itself motivating and rewarding.
Okay.
Right.
So they're not learning as such, they're kind of deducing based on corporate data. I mean, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Makes sense.
So DDL makes use of corpus data, data that may be overlooked by the teacher. I think at this time, this was kind of around the same time that corpus or corpora was starting to be applied to like practical classroom teaching.
Right.
I think that was one of the aims of the University of Birmingham, perhaps.
Yeah.
Was to then apply it back to the classroom.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So it makes use of corpus data that's often overlooked by the teacher and not presented in textbooks. So the language that the students are going to be presented to is real spoken language. This approach involves setting up situations in which students can answer questions about language for themselves by studying raw data to form what is called concordant lines or sentences.
Yep.
Right.
Concordance. I think in this sense, concordance means agreements, like lines of sentences of agreement.
Wouldn't it be like the that kind of typical way of using a corpus where you put in a keyword and you have that word in the middle
and then you
all the
find
different
that's
concordances, right?
And so I think that's what's known as concordance lines.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think the agreement part would be every sentence contains the same word. I guess so. Yeah.
Right.
So the teacher then follows this up. This is kind of the pattern in the classroom, I guess. The teacher would then follow this up by making edits and demonstrate and uncover the target language. Basically. So one of the criticisms of this approach is that the students may not find what they're looking for, but then whatever happens, the teacher needs to react.
Right.
And it's going to be hard to do that. A good teacher would need to you need to be a good teacher.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
First, what corpus are they using, and who is it a corpus of speakers of?
Well, so this DDL one was I think Tim Johns was using the code build corpus with his students at the University of Birmingham.
Okay. Because so I was thinking maybe today it would be quite interesting to do it with like the voice corpus to teach English as a lingua franca. Using students can search through that for different things. My other question was, how would this work in a class? Like I can see it working one-on-one, but how would it work in a classroom setting with lots of students? Would they all be working together to look at language, or would they have separate?
Well, I think this is kind of where call rooms kind of come in. This is where like the
language labs.
Yeah, the onset of language labs and call rooms and students all sitting in front of a computer with a teacher at the front. And
right.
Yeah, so it would have to be a particular kind of setup for this to work, I think.
Yeah, and what would the teacher be doing in that classroom?
Well, I mean, yeah. So from what I read about this is that the students basically find what they want to find, but I think when they talk about the students, I mean like the teacher still sets them a task of some sort.
Okay.
I mean, presumably the starting point is training the students in using corpus data.
Yeah.
How to look through a corpus to find what you want.
Yeah.
But I wonder what the next step is in terms of the students come in and say, I'm iminterested in how get is used, like the word get is used, or like different chunks, or
Is it like the language is pre-chosen by the teacher and then the students look it up? So has the teacher done a corpus search? Does the teacher know what the student's going to find?
I wonder.
Well, here's a couple of quotes from John Higgins talking about Tim Johns' work, and this might answer your questions.
Okay.
Now, other people who were working in CALL, computer-assisted language learning, which I don't know what we called it in those days, it wasn't CALL yet, but they regarded play as something just for motivation. You've got your students to work through a very dull exercise, so let them play a game at the end to reward them. But Tim didn't do it that way. Tim actually got the play to be the learning. You played to learn. He talked about blurring the distinction between research programs and teaching and learning programs.
So what do you think about that?
It was so interesting to see like an example of exactly how it was used with students in the classroom.
I've got an example this is from Corpora in Applied Linguistics, written by Susan Hunston. and she provides a few examples. One example is the word prevent.
Okay.
A student writes the following phrase in an essay: "In their efforts to prevent such incidents to ever happen again, the teacher disagrees with this use of prevent and sends the students to a corpus to investigate the conventional usage of this verb."
Yeah.
And there are so that's what happens first.
Okay, actually, I mean that kind of made me remind me of teaching that I've done in the past, where like phrases do come up or words do come up and students ask you questions, and you do think at that moment it would be great to go to a corpus and find out how this word is actually used, or what words it collates with.
Yeah, and the students so basically the teacher says go and find out for yourself, and then they read all these, and so in this case they provide 23 concordance lines from the Bank of English.
Yep.
For each of these searches, and they provide like you can see here.
Yep.
You can't see, listeners, but
23
lines that all use the word prevent, prevented, and so that gives you a flavour of how I guess this DDL would go about in a classroom or a language laboratory kind of thing. DDL has also been likened to discovery learning approaches.
Okay.
And also with EAP too.
Okay.
And people have talked about how a corpora could be used in EAP to give students vast amounts of academic vocabulary from text very quickly.
So I wonder how much this is a form of teaching and how much is it a form of fine tuning. It sounds from the examples you gave, it's more like once they've got some language, it's a way of
strategy training.
Yeah.
So Tim Johns' teaching procedure. People have talked about Tim Johns as his procedure as being a kibitzer. Do you know that word? Kibitzer?
No.
This was something I came across today. A kibitzer is someone who did not play chess, but watched other people playing and made comments on their play.
A backseat driver.
And this is somebody from the early 20th century Central European chess cafes.
Okay.
Basically somebody who watched people play chess and just commented on what they saw.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was kind of what his... I guess he wanted his students to do the same thing, just to observe and comment on things that they could see from the corpora. Like chess is the corpora in this case. Corpora is the chess in this case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Seems like a slightly strange.
Yeah. But yeah, like you say, DDL, I don't think it sets out to teach language. It kind of presents learners with evidence and asks learners to draw their own conclusions upon discovery, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's Tim Johns' perhaps most well-known contribution. He's also known for being a very well-trained computer programmer, and he made lots of computer learning software for the Sinclair. And we're just going to end with John Higgins talking about one of these applications.
Okay.
But there were so many other little gems. There was a wonderful little program called Two Sticks. The computer randomly drew out two lines labelled A and B, and then generated a sentence, which could be something, A is much longer than B, or A and B are the same length, or A is a little bit shorter, or B is not quite as long as A. And all the student had to do was press T for true and F for false. And we called that receptive drill, because what you're seeing is a lot of pattern similar sentences, but you're having to think about the meaning. You're not just, it's not like mindless, tum-ti-tum, as Julian Dakin, I think he would have got that from Julian Dakin, the tum-ti-tum effect. This was, if you like, eschewing the tum, getting rid of the tum-ti-tum effect. You're thinking about what this means all the time. There was a lovely program called Loan. You typed in a sum of money, and the computer generated a request to borrow that much money. So if you put in £50, it would give you, I wonder if you could see your way to letting me have £50. If you put in 10p, it's got 10p on you. And of course what the student had to do was work out what were the boundaries, how much more money before it changed to a different form. And of course it wasn't really, if you like, test the student, the computer testing the student, it was the student testing the computer. Has it got it right? Go and talk to the other students and find, is this what we actually do? Talk to your teacher. Is this roughly, would it be over £1 that we suddenly can't say, got £1 on you? Where are the boundaries? Of course, they would vary over time with inflation. But, so the computer was imitating a human behaviour, and what the learner had to do was not to imitate it, but to judge it. And I think, again, another case of putting the trial back into trial and error.
TEFL News.
This episode's TEFL News. It's an article that came out about a month ago, so it is actually news.
Yeah, kind of.
Yep. And the title is 10 Best Places to Teach English in 2017.
Okay. Does it change every year?
Of course.
This is like a BuzzFeed article.
No, it comes... Well,
Clickbait.
we'll get onto that. Yeah. All right, so for 10 best places to teach English in 2017, what kind of criteria do you think the writer of this article would apply?
Money.
Really good professional associations.
No? Okay, so money, yes.
Weather.
So salary is one.
Okay.
Weather is not in there, actually.
No, it'll be things like social life, money.
So it's actually six very clear criteria that they have. So first is...
Price of a pint, is that one of them?
That is one, yes. So salary... requirements in terms of qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
They say where to teach, but that's not a criteria. That's just something. Best time to find work.
Okay.
Price of beer, and then a must-try food from that place.
Okay, this sounds like a holiday, not a teaching
So
thing.
at no point there have they mentioned type of students, type
What do
of
you mean,
teaching,
type of students?
the motivation, the need of the English in the country.
Yeah.
No, I mean some people might find that important, but
Yeah.
Not the majority. What kind of teachers are we talking about here? Are we talking about the your
Backpackers.
Johnny Come Latelys, your backpackers?
we'll get on to that. So what kind of which countries do you think feature in the top 10?
Norway.
No, I'd say probably like a European country. I'd probably say like Poland.
Actually, I think no European countries appear in this list. Oh no, sorry, the Czech Republic does.
Okay, so the Czech Republic, that's one.
Yep.
The Philippines.
Yes.
Nice.
That's number 10.
Indonesia.
Czech Republic is number 9. Indonesia is not in
Wales.
there. Wales, no.
Oh, it's European, isn't it? For now.
See, I kind of want to say Thailand, but that doesn't seem.
Okay, I'll run down the list. So 10 was the Philippines. 9 is Czech Republic, the only European country to make the list. 8 is the UAE.
Okay. Salary.
Salary.
Yeah.
7 is Chile,
Okay.
also known as Chile.
Yeah.
6 is Madagascar.
Ah, yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh, cool.
I think the requirements there are maybe just that you're a native speaker.
Right.
Number 5 is Brazil.
Okay.
Number 4 is Nepal. 3 is Nicaragua, also known as Nicaragua.
Interesting.
2 is Vietnam.
All right.
And number 1, Myanmar.
Yeah. I think I've heard this. Yeah. I've heard that their economy is.
Price of beer $1.
Yeah. What's the salary though?
$1,200 to $2,000 a month.
Oh, not bad.
Yeah,
That's
not
okay.
bad. Generally you would need a bachelor's degree and be TEFL certified.
Okay.
Whatever that
And they
means.
have a bit more political stability now, so I guess
Yeah.
that comes with it. Or
Yep.
the beer. Oh wait, the price of a beer would come with the economic stability, and then that would bring jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's that way round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually connected to that, I'd like to talk about another article that I found, which is top 15 countries to find love as a TEFL teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where are you looking for these? Okay, Cupid?
What are your Google searches?
So both of these articles come from the same website, which is actually what I'd like to talk about, which is a website called TEFL Exchange. Have you heard of TEFL Exchange?
No.
Yeah. So it does appear to be the kind of BuzzFeed of the TEFL world.
Okay, interesting.
So articles like top 15 countries to find love as a TEFLer.
I thought we were the BuzzFeed.
6 must-do trips in Taiwan.
With a click hole.
5 adventures you need to have in the Philippines. 3 unexpected perks of living in Tianjin, China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So what kind of teacher do you think this website is aimed at?
Like really late career teachers. who've got sick of their job.
Mm-hmm.
Backpacker teachers, I would guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. Yeah. You know, people that aren't looking to lay roots, stay in a country very long, and want to give it a try and then go somewhere. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I'd like to. I wanted to do that in Japan. But,
Okay. So did you start as a so-called backpacker?
I always started out with the idea of having a year, or maybe two or three here, and then other things happen. You know.
So I don't know. What's interesting to me is maybe just because I haven't. I don't know if I describe myself as that. If I've ever been that kind of teacher, maybe a little bit, early on in my career, but I was just curious if that's still a thing. Like the amount of qualified teachers, I imagine, has been increasing. Maybe the demand for teachers has also increased. I'm not sure.
Well, when I finished my CELTA, and this was nearly 10 years ago now, I remember the tutor telling us, "You're all in a really good position because there's a shortage of teachers around the world." What I think he meant was there's a shortage of white guys around the world. But yeah.
So I guess the other issue connected with this is that often maybe people like us who no longer consider ourselves backpacker teachers or have jobs at universities maybe dislike the association with those types of teachers.
Yeah, I think I do, but I also think that it's kind of wrong to resent that in a way. But I do. So
but equally, I'm a little bit jealous as well. Like equally, I think, that sounds good. That kind of lifestyle. That you can just kind of. I mean, they're not. I mean, backpackers is the wrong term because I imagine within that massive group of people, there are some like decent teachers that kind of just want to go in, do their job, go somewhere else, and so it's kind of, it's not a great term, but
Yeah. I mean, I remember this is quite a while ago, but actually when I lived in England, and I'd tell people what I did, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, like my 18-year-old cousin just got her CELTA, and she's going to Czech Republic or whatever."
Yeah.
I'm sure my parents still think. Because often I hit whenever I last summer I went back and saw family and they're like, "Oh, what have you what have you been teaching them recently then?" What words have they learned? It doesn't work like that.
Right.
You know nothing.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah. Again, when I did my CELTA, I was actually set on teaching as a career at that time, and I remember saying to my tutor, it feels like that from looking online, it feels like this isn't a respected thing, and I don't want to be lumped in with these other people because I see myself as a serious teacher, not as a backpacker. I was quite a horrible person, but I remember that he said, "Well, the thing is, if if these people are going to other countries and teaching, as long as they're teaching good lessons, it doesn't matter. The rest of it doesn't matter, like why they're doing it or anything, as long as they're teaching good lessons." And I thought that was probably correct.
Yeah, and it's also kind of a good lesson, and it doesn't really matter how other people perceive your profession.
Yeah.
So your point is you're surprised that there's kind of a whole online subculture, I guess.
No, not really. I'm not surprised, and well, I think the next thing I wanted to talk about was some of the other articles on TEFL Exchange, which I'd like to read out the headlines. So one is TESOL 2017, what happens at a TESOL conference.
Okay.
And then there's ones, how I failed Delta Module 3, then passed.
Okay.
And then 7 career paths that prove TEFL is no dead end.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So by reading out that first set of things, you kind of suckered us into saying...
No, I think the point was that I think this website seems to cater for both types of teachers.
Right.
And also maybe with a strong understanding that one can become the other.
Right. Yeah, that seems quite positive.
Yeah, I think so.
But I mean, it's still aimed at a certain type of teacher. Your expat traveller teacher. It's not. It's not aimed at teachers in general.
If these expats, if we claim them to be not interested in the wider world of teaching, they probably would never find this website in the first place.
But I think there's always been these websites for those types of teachers, even just like to have forums to chat to other teachers in similar positions. And especially, I think maybe those types of websites tend to focus on just what it's like living in different countries, like specific countries. But I don't know. So when I first came across this website, I thought, it's one of those kinds of things. But looking at some of the articles, I think it must be run by people who have a lot of experience with the business.
The biz.
The biz.
Yeah.
The game, as we know it as. Yeah. You can probably just like submit articles to be, I don't know if it's a team, if it's probably like one or two people.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Let's think up one now, live on the podcast, a listicle.
Right.
Yeah. What would be a good listicle for TEFL, what's it called? TEFL Exchange. The 10...
Top 5 podcasts you must listen to
if you're a TEFL teacher.
If you're a TEFL teacher.
The bottom 5 TEFL podcasts. It's the same list.
Yeah, I mean, what I was surprised is that I haven't looked too deeply in, but you would imagine what would be popular would be something like, the 5 activities you must know going into your classroom. Or...
Yeah. 5 excellent activities for closing out class. Mm-hmm. Well, that's got a bit of alliteration in it.
Yeah.
What about, and you'll never guess what happened next?
Right.
This teacher tried to draw a bone on the board, you'll never guess what happened next. 10 most embarrassing board work mistakes.
No, but I'd actually like to read that.
Right.
That'd be quite interesting.
So there probably is a market for such a website. Yeah.
Yeah, let's start it. TEFLology.
This teacher tried to teach this grammar point. You'll never guess what his student replied with. Like that sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe let's end with this article, which is 7 career paths that prove TEFL is no dead-end job.
Okay.
Can you think of any off the top of your head?
University.
Yes? Yeah.
Teaching at university.
So the one about number 3 is academia, and it starts by saying a surprising option might be the high-flying world of academia. So others are language school management, which is kind of my first step
that's
away from being
good way for money.
a normal teacher.
Yeah.
Senior management and business management, publishing, teacher trainer, language consultant, and finally materials writer / author. So do you think you'll go check out TEFL Exchange?
I think so. It sounds quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that is this week's TEFL news.
TEFL cultures.
Today's TEFL culture is a listener suggestion. So this is...
Another listener suggestion.
Yeah, this is from Jason Anderson. Regular listeners, all 4 of them, may remember that a few episodes back we covered his article about PPP, which stands for...
Present.
Practice. Production.
He contacted us to ask if we'd be interested in talking about a new model, a new 3-stage model that he's developed for use in teacher training courses. And it's called SiSiAP or CAPE, so cap or cape, which sounds like a minimal pair, but it's not.
It is, actually.
Is it?
Cap and cape.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So there you go, it's a minimal pair.
Nothing to do with pronunciation.
It's not, no. So, CAP, do you know what it stands for?
No.
Okay, so it stands for Context Analysis Practice. Okay? So, context for new language is established or provided. Analysis, language features are noticed and analysed. And practice, learners practice using the language. And the optional E is evaluation, so feedback on the practices provided. Okay? Now, this is kind of interesting because what are some of the other 3-stage teaching methods that you can think of? There's obviously PPP. What else?
Like skill acquisition.
3-stage things.
Oh, sorry. It has to be a 3-letter.
It has to be a three letter.
Well, task-based learning, you'd have the...
TBL.
Yeah,
that's all I want.
Okay.
Just the acronyms.
TTT.
TTT.
These days it's TBLT.
Yeah, but just for the sake of this.
But the acronym doesn't describe the process there.
Oh, for God's sake.
Task-based isn't 3 stages. It's not first you do a task, and then you do some base.
If it's hyphenated as well, task-based, that's like one thing.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, all of those others are what you could maybe call bottom-up approaches, in that you start with a theory about how language learning happens, and then you build on that. So PPP was based on communicative whatever. So CAP is slightly different. It's a top-down theory. It's meant to be not a prescription for how people should teach, but a description of how people actually do teach for the most part.
Okay.
Okay. So what Jason Anderson has done is he's analysed course books and looked at how they present language and how they structure their presentation of language. And what you noticed is that increasingly there's been this contextualisation of language before the language itself is analysed. So there's some kind of text, like a newspaper article, or maybe there are pictures or something like that. There's some kind of context established first for the learners. Then the language is taken out, and then there are practice activities. And he's kind of identified this as a common way of teaching, like almost like an unspoken but commonly agreed upon form of best practice.
So this is just a way to conceptualize how, for example, PPP or task-based could work, or does work.
Well, it's meant to be. It kind of, so he actually provides a comparison table of the different models. So here you've got CAP, which is context analysis practice, and he compares it to PPP, which doesn't have a contextualized thing, but then it has presentation, and then the practice is split into practice and production. ESA, which is from Harmer, of course, as I'm sure you well know, has engage for context, study for analysis, and then the practice is kind of split over study and activate.
So it's a way to describe these.
Yes, well, kind of, yeah. But except PPP doesn't have the context.
I guess not explicitly.
Right.
But maybe his point is that it's not there. There's no extra letter before the first P. But when it's done practically in the classroom, there is some kind of context established.
And I think, Matt, as you actually mentioned in the episode when we talked about PPP, you said before the first P, there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's contextualization, there's talking to the learners, there's all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I see.
So in a sense, what Jason Anderson is trying to do is identify this common framework that people tend to use. So he calls it, he says in his paper for TEFL Voices, which is going to be published this year, I describe it below not as an innovation, but as a reflection of shared notions of best practice, a social fact. Okay? So he thinks this would be a good way to introduce teachers, like teacher trainees on initial pre-service courses, to language teaching, essentially. Because if this is what everyone's doing anyway, then maybe it's the best model to give to teachers who are going to go into teaching for the first time. So what do you think of that? Maybe I'll give you a quote from the same paper. So he says, viewed from a socio-cultural perspective, CAP serves as a scaffolding artifact, a guiding model in the early stages of training that can be gradually deconstructed, reworked and experimented with as trainees develop their own theories of learning and build their understanding of potential new language lesson shapes. So present this to them as a basic structure, and then, as I said, it's not meant to be prescriptive. So say this is what most people do, but you can play with it. You can add elements of the task-based approach. You can, move things around a little bit. So how does that sound?
That sounds fine. I mean, if the goal is to sort of find the commonalities between all these approaches, and as you say, in terms of teacher training, let teachers know what is common about all these, and then it would allow them to experiment with them a bit more. I think it works quite nicely. I assume it's not based on any specific model of language acquisition.
No, it's as I say, it's a description of what people do. It's like what we've just all kind of coalesced around. In a sense. Yeah.
It seems like a very sensible approach to kind of bring these kind of things together. And no, I think it's it's not bottom up. It's top down. I think that's sometimes a good thing. It's coming from a good place. It's
so some examples of CAP lesson plans. These can be found in Jason Anderson's paper in the Teacher Training and Development SIG newsletter for TEFL. So he has 3 examples. We'll look at maybe the first one. So this is intermediate level, B1 on the CEFR. Making arrangements by email. So the context, learners read and evaluate 2 different emails that make arrangements. One is clear and to the point, and the other is not so clear and to the point. Analysis. Learners study the structure of the better email and underline useful expressions and phrases. For example, how about if, let me know, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then practice. Learners write emails to each other to plan a weekend holiday and CC in the teacher. I don't know if that last bit is necessary. Yeah.
Did you just add that last bit?
No, it's there.
Okay.
Yep.
But I think if you were the teacher, you could just go around like spying on them anyway, like the government does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I mean, presumably because it is descriptive and because it is meant to be general enough to apply to lots of different approaches, you could, almost any lesson, you could, lesson plan, you could say, this is an example CAP
Right.
lesson, right?
I think so. Although, again, if you do a very strict PPP where it's just, here is a grammar structure, let's practice, like there's no context established there. But
Sure.
I don't think many people do that. But the fact many people don't do that kind of proves the point that we're all doing this CAP thing.
Right. So, but I mean, is he then saying that if they don't provide the context, that's not a good lesson plan?
Well, that's
is he saying like, is the context part important?
I get the feeling that he thinks it's important,
Okay.
but
So there is a bit of prescriptivism there.
But he does say there's he's got a bit at the end of the paper in TEFL Voices, which is called A Cautious Coder. And it says, in offering this model, my primary intention is not to prescribe how either novice or experienced teachers should teach. I make no claims that this is necessarily the best way to structure new language lessons, nor do I intend to suggest that it's appropriate for structuring all lesson types. I offer it simply as a reflection of what appears to be the currently dominant paradigm for the introduction of new language, at least expressed through global ELT coursebooks, the practices of those who use them, and the expectations of certain syllabi and educators in pre-service teacher education, particularly on Cert TESOL and CELTA courses. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's fair enough.
Yeah, I think so too.
I wonder, does that first context always have to be an actual example of language in use, or could it just be awareness raising? Could it just be a simple discussion question? Because that's what a lot of people do anyway, right? They say, have you ever sent an email? What kind of language did you
right.
use? Is that not context anyway? Or?
Yeah, so I think it could be, yeah. Again, with this comparison table, he's got like TTT, test, teach, test approach.
Okay.
Learners' current knowledge of the language is checked. That's counted as context.
Okay, so it's all part of the context.
Yeah, so whatever you do to establish the context is there. He does also say there's a few other alternative lesson shapes where you can invert things. So you've got context analysis, practice evaluation is the main one.
That was my next comment.
Yeah, you can swap around the practice and the analysis in a sort of task-based approach, so context, practice, analysis. In a task-supported learning situation, you have context analysis task, so CAT. CAT, obviously my favourite acronym. Or the TTT would be checking analysis practice, so it's still CAP.
Chap.
It says chap there.
Yeah.
I think so. That was kind of what I was curious about in terms of especially the analysis and practice stages, how they may be moved around. I think maybe also what's common and which is less easily displayed on that kind of chart is that the analysis and practice might, a bit of analysis, bit of practice, bit of analysis, but like they kind of get meshed together.
Right.
See what I mean?
And I think a lot of what you described there in that email example, that's production. They're writing an email. They're going to CC you in. They're producing.
That was the final stage, though. So that's But that
you could consider that to be part of the practice, I suppose.
Yeah, well, he actually does.
Depends
If you look in again the conversion table for the PPP one, practice and production are both counted as practice in the CAP model.
But just
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to be descriptive, to take a sort of a corpus based approach in a way to how we teach languages.
Yeah.
And Jason was actually interested he is interested in feedback on this idea. So if anyone has any feedback about this CAP idea, you can contact him at jasonanderson1@gmail.com. Unfortunately, there was already a Jason Anderson at gmail.com.
Anderson spelt
Anderson.
S-O-N.
Yeah. And you can also find links to the papers which I've been quoting from and these conversion tables and so on at his website, and we'll provide a link to that in the description of this episode. If If you'd like to get in contact with us, please send an email to teflology@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions, then you can send an email there. As we've proved on today's episode, we do take suggestions seriously, and we will get to them in 6 or 7 months. You can also follow us on Twitter @TEFLology. Go to our Facebook page where you can like it, and then you'll see our updates as they go up. You can also go to our website where you can listen to old episodes, of which we have 80 something. And if you are so inclined, please rate and review us on iTunes or on whatever media you choose to download these episodes from. So, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye.